Yes, yes.
So first of all, if you don't know who I am, my name is Graham Moore, otherwise known as Daddy Dragon, and I am going to show my little thingy. I've just been given that, right? That gives me immense pleasure because people don't realise that the Whiffen was the original flag of England. It's based on, this is not a Whiffen, but it's similar. And why I got the name Daddy Dragon was literally because all I ever spoke about was England and the Constitution and our common law rights and the history of the common law and the history of the Constitution and why it protects us. So people then referred to me and sent me books, and inside it said, "To Father Dragon," right? And then it got cut down to Daddy Dragon, as you do, and then it got cut down and Americanised into DD. So you'll hear lots of different references to me today. The major point to point out today is before we continue, you will see an English flag and the hashtag muted. That's very appropriate for today. I'm not going to say where we are, but this place has stepped in literally with hours' notice and hosted this event. You'll all be aware that I've actually come up from Devon, where I now reside, to do this event. And it is an English constitutional seminar where I explain to people our laws, where they come from, explain how old England is, etc., and just talk people through it. Now, the event last night, once we put up the constitutional, all these frames, the constitutional laws, all the books set out exactly as you can see it now, we then left the hall, went back to where I was staying. There was a phone call, and the council hall cancelled without a notice. We said, why? And they said, we don't like your content. The content is the English Constitution and England and our rights. Just to make sure everyone is clear on this, that's against the Equality Act. It is discrimination. Our solicitors have already contacted me and said we are suing them. Right? I want to make sure I finish this. In Britain, 40 years ago, you could put a sign on a pub door, on a hotel door, on a guest house, and say, no blacks, no Irish, and no travellers. Now, the sign on that door is no English, right? And the only people that can turn that around is you, right? Again, I'm going to emphasise this before I start. There is the Constitution, there is the Constitution and the common law, and nowhere under the English Constitution, written or by convention, does it mention race, right? The English, via a certain case which was Stuart versus Somerset, 1772, a white working class non-lawyer called Granville Sharp stopped slavery, right? It wasn't the British. Wilberforce was on our side, right? But it took him 20 consecutive years to get the Abolition Act through a British Parliament. So every year he put it through, and every year the British Parliament rejected it because they wanted to carry on. But we, as the English and English judges, made it unlawful. And then therefore it was unlawful, it was therefore unprofitable. And that's what, they're not teaching you that in school anymore. They've reversed the tables, and the British, through divide and rule, which is all they've ever done all around the world, basically get the Scots and the English at it against each other. I've got no issues with the Scots, no issues with the Welsh, no issues with the Irish and the Northern Irish, and certainly no issues with Cornwall, right? We believe in self-determination. Just to make sure you're all clear, that is a human right. global human right, UN Convention on Human Rights, Declaration, self-determination. Right? So we'll be talking about some of that, but not majorly, but everyone will understand what it is that we're about. Okay? So, again, muted, cancelled by the other place. Don't forget, this is the English Constitution Society. We are non-political, absolutely non-racist. What we do is explain to people what the law is, right? And then how you claim your rights, because you must claim your rights. If you don't claim them, you've lost them. And the system itself is geared that way. Can I have someone just give me a hand taking the left-hand side of the red one on that off? So if you take the red one off, just clip it off, and I'll clip that one off. And then just wait that one over. Just if you can roll that up and just put it on the side there, and I'll go from there. Right, so what we're going to do now, I will start to talk through. Hopefully you can all hear me and you're not getting too much of a buzz from me being too close to the mic. Good, bad or ugly? I'll take it it's all right. Right, okay. So, I said earlier, if I was to put our constitutional statutes all around this place, it'd take up both sides and the back. The most important ones are here. There are other ones. There is one before, so that you've got the Magna Carta of 1215, which is a charter. Some people say that that's the original law. They're actually wrong to say it's the original law. It's not the original law. There was a charter before that, which was, let me think when it was. I think it was in 1690. Not 1690, 1190. So you had something before the Magna Carta, and that was called the Charter of Liberties. And the king started messing about and not giving us them rights. The barons rose up again, and we ended up with the Great Charter. Again, it was written in Latin. Some people have said that the Pope annulled it. The Pope couldn't annul it. Under English law and the traditions of England and English law, it was by deed of battle. In other words, there's some people who say that King John had a knife to his throat or a sword to his throat. He sealed the Magna Carta, he didn't sign it, at Runnymede. But the point I'm trying to make to you is, the Pope cannot annul it, because we have always had something in England called deed of battle. I could go into details with that. It's where eventually the defamation laws come from. Everyone know about, literally 200 years ago, if someone insulted you, you'd slap them around the face and say, I'll see you at dawn on Sunday, and you walk out in the green, they take 10 paces further and shoot each other. That's deed of battle, right? So it's part of the deed of battle, and they abolished it by bringing in defamation laws. So to stop semi-intelligent rich people shooting each other over honour or pride, they brought in and they said it is much better to ruin a man financially than it is to shoot him. In other words, for them it was a fate worse than death, to be made skint by your enemy, right? So they brought that in. So that's all part of the deed of battle going all the way back, and why you cannot annul, you could not annul the original Magna Carta. And in fact, if you go back and look at Hansard, there is a number of debates in Parliament where politicians who actually understand the law made reference to that you cannot make a law that goes against the Magna Carta, right? And again, that's in Hansard. So the Magna Carta was really important in various ways. What we've left up on there is chapter 9. No free man shall be taken or imprisoned or be disseised of his freehold or liberties or free customs, or be outlawed or exiled or any otherwise destroyed, nor will we not pass upon him nor condemn him, but by lawful judgment of his peers, right, which means a jury. But the jury of that time was not the jury of today, just to let you know, right? Them people who say we want to go back to the juries of 1215, you definitely don't want to get involved with that, right? And the reason why they brought in a new form of jury then, and it wasn't the form of jury we got now, is because prior to that, it was by ordeal, right? What does that mean? Well, if someone thought you was guilty of something, this is the way they proved it. They take your hand or arm and stick it in a vat of boiling oil, and if it went septic and you died, you was guilty, right? You was guilty. And then if you recovered after months and months and months, you was innocent. Bit like the ducking ponds for witches, you know? I'm sure my ex-wife is in one somewhere. Right. Nor will we the law of the land. We will sell to no man. We will not deny or defer to any man either justice or right. We will not deny, which is why they cannot not allow you to have a court case, etc., etc., and it must be fair, or defer, right? So when you start seeing court cases that are coming up to, one guy I know was 13 years before he got justice on a single, by the way, that was the police that smashed his head in, and it took 13 years for him to get compensation, right? So just think about that, and then think about what the law says, and you all understand. And when I say this guy's now got brain damage, he literally got his head caved in, and they never ever offered up the police constable that did it to him, right? So before I go further into the rest of it, I just want to cover that off before we do anything else. There will be a questions and answers once we've got into this for about 2 hours. 15-minute break. The toilets are that way. The back part of there is a fire exit. So all you've got to do, if there's anything goes wrong, you just go all the way through out that door. This is important because people, and namely government, universities, colleges, the media, right, the mainstream media, and even some alternative media, tell us we haven't got a constitution, right? So the first thing to say to you is, this is England. We, as a nation, are 1,100 years old. If we don't have a constitution, why do we have a constitutional monarchy? Why do we have courts? And why do we have a parliament? Because we have a constitution. That is what puts them three elements of state in place. Those people then, normally on the extreme left I may add, then say to me, without answering that, but we haven't got a written constitution. Oh, right. So what's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? Bill of Rights. Ooh. You know they keep talking about the British Bill of Rights? Why do we need one? We've got the English Bill of Rights. The claim of right for Scotland. We don't need a Bill of Rights. We've got one. They don't like it. Right? I'm going to get to that as we talk through. And then you've got a really important one, which is the Act of Settlement, which is an extension of that one, the English Bill of Rights. And I'll be reading through the important parts. This is not a dry seminar on law, right? What I do is tell you the important parts to empower you to understand that you are constitutionally protected from the government and from basically any state function, and that includes the police, right? Who are not who they used to be, right? And I can tell you the reason why and when it changed. But they say we don't have a written constitution. So what I do then is pick up this book, which is the Halsbury's Statutes. By the way, Halsbury's Statutes and Halsbury's Laws of England. Halsbury's Laws of England is the common law, and that's the statutory law. I hold up these books and I say, so why is it then that Halsbury's Statutes, which is in every law court in the country, volume number 10, 4th edition, constitutional law, which is probably 2.5, maybe 2.5 inches thick, with all of those constitutional statutes in there, right? So, if we don't have a written constitution, why is there a book that says Halsbury Statutes, 4th edition, volume number 10, constitutional law, and you can tell any judge in this country and any magistrate in this country, you can walk in there and take that with you and says that is against my constitutional rights. I'll go more detail about that later. Then you have another book, which is Halsbury's Laws of England, 4th edition, volume number 8, conflicts of laws, which I'm going to get to, and constitutional law. So the common law constitution, right? So again, those people say we haven't got a written constitution. You show them these books, you show them this, and you say, well, what's that then? And by the way, they still then go on to the next phase. Without arguing back and saying, I accept that, we've got a constitution, they then say, yeah, but we haven't got a codified constitution, like America. Who gave America their constitution? England, not the British. The British attacked them. In 1776. Oh, by the way, anyone heard of Paul Revere? The guy who rode and said, the British are coming, the British are coming. Everyone remember that? From history? We should do. There was another guy that rode with him. And I'm guilty of forgetting his name, right? But everyone's forgotten his name. And he rode in the other direction saying, the British are coming, the British are coming. What colour was he? Black. Right, erased from history. Here's the kicker. What was his job? He was a judge. A black judge in 1776 in the United States of America. What? And they never tell you that. They never teach you that at school. They've erased him from history. Right? And they've done the same thing with the English. It's what they intended all along. So again, they say, we haven't got a codified constitution. So I then say, well, what's the Bill of Rights? The Bill of Rights, Article 1 to 13, is codified. And we can go through the codification. I will partly go through it when I get to this. This was then extended, so what I'm going to do at the moment is just show you something briefly. The Bill of Rights of 1688 come from the Glorious Revolution. Does everyone understand there's a lot of talk at the moment about a civil war? Anyone heard that? Yeah. Right, so I'm going to make sure everyone's aware of this. Civil wars are not very nice. They're the worst type of war, right? And there's a lot of military that are with us, including special forces. They have done this type of thing to other countries on behalf of the British regime and British establishment. They know what's going on, right? You don't want a civil war. And the reason you don't is because they need one, meaning our enemy. And the reason they need one is you cannot rewrite the Constitution unless there's been civil unrest and they bring a convention parliament. That comes from the convention parliament. Does everyone know what a convention parliament is? There was no king. We was known as the kingdom without a king, and it was the Glorious Revolution because the king threw the English seal into the River Thames and rode off. They caught him in Ramsgate, by the way. Sent a message back, and I got a message back from Ramsgate, I don't know. And they said, do you want us to keep him? Do you want him back? And they didn't want to cut his head off. So they said, no, let him go. And he went over to France. But this particular book is the Declaration of Rights, 1689, and it tells you the history. There's another one that gives you the full history. Them two books on their own are worth about, one of them's worth 1,500 quid to get the original, right? They don't want you knowing what the history is, the real history of this. So getting back to a convention parliament is the highest form of parliament. So you've got two things. You've got a convention parliament And then you've got something else called an ordinary parliament. The same thing exists in laws. You've got a constitutional statute which cannot be changed, and then you've got something else called an ordinary statute which Parliament and representatives can make law and change, but they're not allowed. It is a limited government, a limited Parliament, and a limited crown. That is what the Glorious Revolution created. But they're trying to erase that part from your memory completely. They used to teach you this, by the way, prior to early 1970s. Anyone know what the problem was with the early 1970s?
The IRA.
Huh?
No?
Who?
Ireland.
IRA?
Yeah, EU.
There's a lot of issues with the IRA. I can touch on that if you want, right? It was with the European Union, or what they called it then was the Common Market, or the EEC, right? That statute has what's known as a supremacy clause. Still law in this country, that no one can have control over the English. No external prince, pontificate, pope, anyone can have any control over the English. The only people that can govern the English are the English, right? That supremacy clause is still there. That's why they don't want you to know that the English Bill of Rights exists. It's where America, everyone heard of the Second Amendment, right? Guess where America got it from? The English. It comes from the Bill of Rights, the English Bill of Rights. There's a case called Kerr in America where they went through historical record and said our Second Amendment comes from England. It's our seventh Amendment, right? Or our seventh. They're all in singular, by the way. So that means all of the rights are yours and can never be taken away, the God-given rights, or you can use them on their own, right? So everyone remember COVID and all that nonsense. They're not allowed to create laws and it's called a pretended law. Well, anything that you say is a law and it's been passed through the non-procedure of Parliament, which is a lot of the Coronavirus Act was, you're not allowed to do that, right? And it was us who started writing to the Daily Mail, to the schools. I don't know if anyone knows this, but we actually wrote a common law, lawful letter to all the schools that were jabbing kids. We issued them to the headmaster, the head of the School of Governors and the form tutor, and basically said you're personally responsible for any of them children that are jabbed in your school, right? You're personally responsible. The schools then sent the letter to the government. 3 days later, they cancelled the whole programme, right? So again, if you think you're not having the knowledge to empower yourself, that's the difference you can make if you know what the law is. And every part of that law was bang on, right? And they went, well, hang on a minute, we're not doing this. And they stopped it. The important part of this, I'm only going to briefly run on this and then I'll run through it. An act declaring the rights and liberties of the subject and settling the succession of the crown. Whereas the Lords Spiritual and Temporal and Commons assembled at Westminster lawfully, fully and freely representing all estates of the people. The estates of the people are 3 different elements. You've got the Lords, the Commons, and then you've got the Crown in Parliament. The Crown in Parliament is represented by ministers, right? They're actually ministers of Crown. How many of you know that under English law, well, let me ask you a different question. How many people think that you've got to be a politician and the leader of the political party to be Prime Minister? How many of you think that? Right? You don't. What the law says is that the Crown picks the minister. But the fact that they're offering him and they found a way of producing their own person that they want to put forward, the Crown's just accepted that. But he doesn't have to do that. In fact, if you go back to, I think it was the early 1950s, if you became a minister, so you was given a portfolio, you had to resign as an MP. You couldn't be an MP and a minister at the same time. Right? It's actually, technically, unlawful to do what they're doing. There is a limit on how many ministers are allowed to be in Parliament. It was 25, it may have gone up to 60, I can't remember the exact figure now, but there's somewhere in the region of 160 to 180 ministers, which is completely unlawful. But people like you don't know that. You're not told that. You can actually challenge that and take it to the High Court and say that's what the Constitution says, they're not supposed to have that amount of ministers, because it means the Crown is taking over Parliament, right? And it's not allowed. So again, freely representing the states, February in the year of our Lord 1688, present unto their majesties, then called and known by the name and style of William and Mary, Princess and Prince of Orange, being present in their proper persons, a certain declaration, which was the Declaration of Rights. Just to make sure everyone's aware of this, there's two separate documents of the Glorious actually there's three. There's Declaration of Reasons, which told us why they come over here, and they was invited, it was not an invasion. Then there's the Declaration of Rights, there's 27 heads of terms, and it's called private law. It's a private contract between the Crown and you. So you hear some of these people saying, I don't contract with you, right, and all that. If they actually understood the common law and the law of contract, they will understand that the Declaration of Rights is crucially important, and you can say there's 27 heads of terms of a contract that put you in place as the king of this country, and you swore an oath to it, therefore you have to abide by that. If you don't, you have perjured your oath. Has King Charles perjured his oath? Yeah, he has, right? Technically, he's abdicated. It was a glorious revolution that resolved that, because there was a big issue whether he had absconded, because the Commons were saying he's absconded, and the Lords, which are the peers of the Crown, were saying he's abdicated, right? So the Commons said, we don't care what name you put to it, right? He's not here, and he's run off, right? So he's left us. We want that information. So they said, right, well, we'll just say he's abdicated. What they made clear, Lord John Somers, who was the framer of the English Bill of Rights, and who became the next man who became Lord Chief Justice, was John Holt, which we'll get to. They were the framers of the English Bill of Rights. Now, most people have heard of George Washington. Right, he was one of the framers of the English Bill of Rights. Has anyone heard of Lord John Somers? Has everyone ever heard of Lord Chief Justice, as an outrister, John Holt? Right, so once you understand you've done a law degree, right, and a good law degree, because it's mostly self-educated, is the best way to do it, right? So again, once you understand all that, don't forget this is a fly-through, just to make sure everyone's aware. My personal opinion is you need to do a 2-year foundational law degree on the Constitution of England before you even start on a law degree, right? That means solicitors and barristers. They've stopped teaching this to barristers and solicitors in the early 1970s when they stopped teaching our kids it as well, right? And they did that because we went into the European Union, like I've already said. Because they didn't want you to know that that had a supremacy clause. And therefore, what the Parliament was actually doing was subverting the English Constitution. The other word for subversion of the Constitution is treason, right? It's a hanging offence. So again, when you look at that, the heads of the Declaration of Lords and Commons recited, whereas the late King James II, by the assistance of diverse evil counsellors, judges, councillors, right? We're not talking about the local council here, we're talking about the Privy Council, which are basically any legal professional that takes silk and then can become, if they're given a knighthood, part of the Privy Council, which advised the King councillors, judges and ministers employed by him did endeavour to subvert and extirpate the Protestant religion and the laws and liberties of this kingdom, right? And then it goes into further detail, and then it starts to telling you what they can do. There were 13 wrongs and 13 rights, but that is a codified constitution, right? It's only part of it, and I'll get back to one of them books in a couple of seconds. And then you've got the extension, right? So I'm going to read out because it's really important that people know that the name of the law is important. So that's called the short title. Short title Bill of Rights. Short title Act of Settlement. It's telling you what it's doing. And then you've got something called a preamble. The preamble, or the long title, and then the preamble. But that is an act for the further limitation of the Crown and better securing the rights, this is why it's important, better securing the rights and liberties of the subject. That was done on the hurry up, and then they had to cement it, and that's what they did. That's why they cannot take these rights off you. No one can, right? So, and again, you're the one who's protected by it. And then it goes into detail. Without me going through all of that, that's crucially important. At chapter 4, it says that the laws of England are the birthright of the people thereof. Two crucial things. The laws of England are the birthright of the people thereof. What does a birthright mean? They are your heir rights. What that is basically a document that in law we would call it a trust deed, right? There are elements to this that are absolutely bang on. So there are three elements of a trust that you need. One is you need trustees. The trustees for this are the Commons, which is us, because they're our representatives, right? They hold our sovereignty, we lend it to them, right? Then you have the Crown in Parliament, which is the other trustee. Then you have the Lords, which is the other trustee. They're the three realms of the state that are the trustees of this, right? That's what the Glorious Revolution was really about. The next thing you need are beneficiaries. Who are the beneficiaries? You are. You're the beneficiaries, and the heir rights are your children, grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren. No one can take it. That's what's under attack at the moment, right? Which I'm going to get into. But then you need something crucial, which is a benefit. If you read through this document, it actually enshrines the laws of the realm of England forever, right? And that's what that is actually securing. That all of the laws of realm, so it goes all the way back it goes back to Anglo-Saxon times. And if anyone don't know anything about the Anglo-Saxons, apart from being two Germanic tribes, they had some of the best laws I've ever read. I've read like Tribes of Britain, and it shows you them, right? And Anglo-Saxon mums were highly respected. They were the educators of the children. And because they couldn't read or write, they rhymed. Do you remember doing the times tables when you was a kid and you had to sit there going, 10 times 10 4, until it was rock solid in your mind, right? Well, they used to do the Anglo-Saxons used to rhyme the laws of England to the kids. So everyone knew the law of the land, off by heart, right? Here's the kicker. If you hurt an Anglo-Saxon woman's children, I mean seriously hurt them, or whatever, if you was what they now call a paedophile, right, and you hurt her kids, she had the right to kill you, and no one could prosecute her. So I'm half like, you know, saying they didn't have really bad laws then. I quite like them laws, right? And the only people who like them laws are people like us, right? Everyone else seems not to like it. So again, we're going all the way back, the statutes, and what this is about. So people were saying to me, where can I get this information? Well, There's another great facility called the Hamlin Lectures from the Hamlin Trust in Devon. Right? Now, Cambridge University tried to take these offline, and our group contacted the trustees and said that the database of these lectures, and I'll explain the lectures in a couple of minutes, the database of these lectures had been taken down. The trustees said, thank you for telling us, right? They then got involved and said, part of the trust's obligations is this free information is to the public from our top law laws, explaining the law to them in simple terms. I don't mean you're simple. In other words, it's not dry. They give you everyday examples of what they can and can't do. From the top law lords in the country are in these lectures. So all you've got to do to become an expert in law and understand your rights is to read that. The first one was a guy, anyone heard of Lord Denning? Yeah. Right. Freedom Under the Law, 1949 is the first lecture, right? And it's one of the best lectures you'll ever read, right? Everyone I know who knows of Lord Denning, and by the way, I also knew his clerk, because his clerk used to email me and say, Tom would have loved you. Because Tom Denning was a working class judge. The establishment hated him, right? And the reason they did, because he openly said, judges should be mischievous, right? He liked having a go at the government, and he liked having a go at Parliament. And he'd done so many things in our favour. Lots and lots of cases. He used the Bill of Rights often and stopped them and said, you can't do it. A recent case, and we'll say recent, 1975, there was a case in New Zealand where the government taxed someone, and they shouldn't have done. They taxed a whole group of people. And one man in New Zealand stood up and said, you can't do that. And the bloke said, the minister said, why is that? They said, it's against the Bill of Rights. They took it straight to the High Court, and what did the High Court judge say? They said, the gentleman is completely right. This is where I get to claiming your rights. And the judge said, it goes against Article 1 of the English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights is in full force. You cannot do that. It embarrassed the government. They had to retract everything they said, but the guy won. And it was a single man standing up against the whole government of New Zealand that stood up for everyone. It's called public interest, and stood up. So don't forget, you've got Declaration of Rights, which is private law or contract law, and then you've got public law, which is what that is. What does public law mean? In simple terms, it means it is a criminal injunction against the government, right? Again, if I go back to this book, this is simple stuff. It sounds complicated, it's not. That book, and that book, and that one there in particular, tells you there's something which is an indictable offence, it's still the law in this country, which is called contempt of sovereign and contempt of statute. They are the laws that protect you against the government going against your rights from there and your rights from there, right? I'm going to get to another bit in a minute. People, and in fact I'll cover it briefly now. Acts of Settlement 1700, why is it so important? Because chapter 3, I think it was, stated that you could not be a member of Parliament, you could not be a lord, you could not have a position of authority or profit in England unless you was born of English parents, plural, right? Both your parents had to be English for you to be in any position of profit or a member of Parliament or the House of Lords or a mayor or sitting in on the council, any of them things, right? You couldn't do it. What took it away was something called the British Nationality Act in 1948, Schedule 4, hidden away in that document was the repeal of that section, right? That's unlawful. It's called ultra vires. It was an order, the British Nationality Act of 1948 and 1981, which further erased our nationalities of English, Welsh, Scottish and Irish, right? That's why everyone knows you can't put on a form English. It's got to be British, right? Well, the British Nationality Act was what created that problem, right? And what we do is explain that to people and tell people it was unlawful, right? So we're not saying you can't be foreign, you can't be in this country of your... All that EFO nationalism is nonsense, right? Because the English Constitution does not mention race. But why was that put in the Act of Settlement? Does anyone know? Because the wonderful Prince of Orange and Princess of Orange brought people with them from Holland. And then people started taking positions of power within our parliament and within positions of profit. And then they started to attack Englishmen's rights. And then they started to use the money that was drawing off of English labour and sending it back to Holland, right? So they said, you can't do that. We want the Dutch out of our parliament, right? Let me just make sure I'm clear on this. The Dutch are white, right? They're not brown, right? And they're not black. They're white, but they have a different culture to us, right? So then what happened, many years later, there was a group of people, just to let you know, called the USSR. Anyone heard of him? Right. And there was a guy called Joseph Stalin, who just happened to be Jesuit, right? He was Jesuit educated. There's a reason why Jesuits are really bad, because we had problems with Jesuits. It's why the Pope and Catholics are banned from any authority in England, right? No one is having a go at Catholic people. I certainly am not. I was married to a Catholic for 33 years, right? Never caused any issues whatsoever, apart from the fact she's actually an atheist. But, and it was a Catholic religion that turned her into an atheist, right? So the point I'm getting to you is the Jesuits are a different group of people, right? They caused a war, 1848, the Sunderland War, I think it was called, in Switzerland. Does anyone know there was a massive civil war in Switzerland? Really bad civil war. That's why they've been neutral ever since, because of that war. And what they did after that war, because it was the Jesuits and the Catholic cantons versus the Protestant cantons, and then the Swiss banned Jesuits and Catholics from Switzerland, right? So everyone blames the Jews, right? I'm not suggesting there isn't a Jewish mafia. Don't forget I'm honest. So I'm not a diplomat and I'm not a politician. I'm only here to tell you the truth from the archives of what I've actually read, right? Most of there is a financial Jewish mafia, right? But everyday Jews are really nice people. I know lots of them, and some of my absolute heroes, Jimmy Goldsmith is one of them, right? I look up to, right? So we've got to say there are people that are wrong, and what they've done in law is wrong, but they're not punished, and they're very powerful people. The Jesuits, in my opinion, are even worse, right? Because they have caused a lot of what's going on now in other countries, not just here. Now in South America, a lot of the poorest border, the charities sitting on the side of Texas are actually Jesuit charities. Everyone heard of Care for Calais? Go and have a look at their website. It's got the Jesuit emblem at the top on the right? And people were like, wow, I never knew that. And I said, all you've got to do is look. And then they do things right in front of you. So getting back to this, and the Acts of Settlement, getting back to the USSR, because it's really important, Joseph Stalin, he created something. He was the commissar of identity in the USSR, the Soviet Union. And what did he create? A nationality called Soviet. All right? Well, in 1948, 3 years after we won the Second World War, which we didn't, we actually lost, the British created the British Nationality Act, and erase your identity. Exactly what happened in the USSR, right? And when you understand that's what they've done, and that's why you can't refer to yourself as English, again, I want everyone to understand this, right? I've got lots of Scottish friends, lots of Irish friends, lots of Welsh friends, right? We're all friends because we're what's called true patriots. We understand that we are a brotherhood of nations. It's the statutory union that caused the problem. We already had a common law union from 1603. The British Union, statutory union, which was the start of the centralisation. Centralisation is communist in nature. Most people don't even know that England was a confederacy. And what that means is the shires and the counties were independent of Parliament, right? The only thing that governs, so they could make their own laws. You've all heard of bylaws. Well, the bylaws were you making the laws that govern your community. And as long as you didn't offend against the constitutional rights and common law rights of the English that Parliament and the Convention Parliament had created, you could make any law you wanted. How many of you knew that a chief constable in County Durham actually went out to his police force and said, switch off the speeding cameras. They're against the Bill of Rights. Right? This is not long ago. This is about 10 years ago. Right? Guess what happened to him? He was sacked. Right? And what he said to his officers were, if you see someone speeding, use your gun, stop the car and have a word with the driver. Explain to him that speeding kills and then send them on their way. Right? The government weren't happy with that. And they ended up sacking him. Right? Police chief constables hold a lot of power, and some of that power they shouldn't have. Everyone understand that a chief constable and every constable, there is only one oath to a police constable, whether you're the chief, the superintendent, an inspector or a constable. Does everyone, well, how many people here think that police officers are public servants?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of hands going up.
Yeah.
They're not. They're not. They're crown servants. Their oath is to the crown and to the monarch, not to you and not to England, but to the crown itself. We already proved that in the High Court, and the High Court judge accepted it when I showed them what the Police Federation has actually said about the oath. So they are not, they are crown servants. They are personally responsible for anything they do against you, right? Because the king can do no wrong, but his servants can. And that's why you serve them and you personally sue them, not the chief constable. Right? We've got a case in the High Court at the moment that's coming December 2026. So again, hopefully, I'm still got to go through this and I will go through it. But just to make sure you're aware, Sir John Laws, part of the lectures from the Hamlin Society, is the common law constitution. That's what we've got. So if anyone says to you, we haven't got a codified constitution, you say to them, we've got a common law constitution. What that allows is a little bit of leeway for the judges. That is far better than a fully codified constitution. A fully codified constitution is too restrictive. And don't forget, England has existed for 1100 years, not 250 years like America. But they took their constitution from us, right? The English. Everyone aware that within a month of President Trump becoming president again, he sent out an official executive order in the United States of America and said the official language of the United States of America is English. He didn't say American, didn't say American English. He said English. You know what the next executive order was? Our Bill of Rights is written in English. Right? He's telling everyone this is the Constitution of America and it come from England, not the British. Right? So Sir John Law's Common Law Constitution, there's some wonderful bits in there that I've used in various court cases. Another one which is really important, and people don't know who this guy is. This is Sir William Wade, one of our scholars of English law. A.V. Dicey, I've got a book over there which I'll go into in a couple of minutes. But Constitutional Fundamentals, He's the guy who said he knew everything about the English Constitution. He was best friends with Lord Denning. If you go and look at our Rumble channel, there's a 2.5 hour discussion between these two people that is lost to history, right? And just getting back to Lord Denning, anyone heard of desert island discs? Well, Lord Denning was interviewed, and they said, "What songs do you want to go on the desert island discs?" And he said, "What's the word? What's the one? Reeds or Reeves, the old English song where it's all violins." And he said, "I want that." But he then said they got into a discussion, and he said, "What do you think about English law in reference to the working man in England?" And he said, "The only time an Englishman gets a fair trial in this country is when I'm on the bench and he has a jury, and I will ensure a fair trial." And he said, and he was an appellate court judge, right, which is the second highest court in the country. And he said, and the only time he's guaranteed, listen to this, to get a vote in his favour is when I'm on the bench. So even if he thought you were slightly off, he'd still give you the benefit of the doubt, right? So he was a great judge. And he was working class. So again, you've got trial by jury. Everyone should understand this one. Lots of people talk about the jury system. This was written, again, Hamlin Lectures, trial by jury, little booklet, fascinating history of juries, which I'm not going to go through. It's a whole 2-hour subject on its own. But Lord Devlin, right, one of our greatest jurors, and in there, for example, this is what I think is funny about certain people that talk about juries. Let's go back to the Magna Carta. Yeah, let's press people to death if you don't come out with the right answer. That's what the juries were that day, right? But the whole point of mentioning that book, so while some people refer to me as an expert, no one can be an expert in the Constitution of England or the common law of England. It's too vast. Even judges disagree with each other, right? And they're experts. That's why you have a panel. But the point of that jury book, something I learned, that women weren't allowed on juries until 1919. Did you know that? I never knew that. I thought juries was always, men and women, but they're not. It was always men. And they had to be freeholders. So people that rented couldn't be on the jury. Right, so but because they wanted someone to have skin in the game, right, you had to believe in your country and what you was building up, and therefore, if you was a freeholder, and technically you was a man, right, that was the only group of people that was allowed on the jury. So there's lots of things that people are misled about what the law is. So before I go into any further elements of this, I am going to talk through that. I wonder how we're doing for time, because that's a bit that takes the time. So you've got these two that are really important. Act of Settlement, which backs up the Bill of Rights. You've got the Coronation Oath Act, and it's really important that people understand what that is. That oath is crucially important, because it was created by the Bill of Rights, and it was created, again, via the Crown and Parliament Recognition Act. And the reason why we had to have that was because it was a convention parliament. Because, again, I've said it once, we was a kingdom without a king, right? So we chose to put king back in place. But the Declaration of Rights, which was read to him and to Princess Mary, they had to agree to them terms. If you look at that book, it tells you 27 heads of terms. It's not an insignificant contract. That contract is still live on parchment, held in the House of Lords, right? So is the Bill of Rights. It's the only statute in the House of Lords, still there, still in the library, that still retains bill. Everything else is called a statute, right? And it's because of the whole convention. So one of the things you need to take away from this is a convention parliament is the highest form of parliament in England. There's nothing higher than that. And one of the reasons why they want a civil war is because they need to recreate a convention parliament to rewrite the constitution. And when they rewrite that constitution, they will erase every right you ever had. Are you all aware that they did that? Let me sit down and take a drink of water as well. So I've got sciatica. So if I'm up too long, I get a pain down both sides of my legs. Right, so the other side of it that you need to remember, and I'm going to go through this middle one in a couple of seconds, is in 1937, they rewrote the Southern Irish Constitution and they replaced it with lots of words which is for the common good, right? For the common good. It sounds innocuous, sounds lovely, right? What that means is, if all of you, or 70% of you, voted to amputate my legs because I've got sciatica, right? Even though it's got nothing to do with my legs, it's actually my back, right? If 70% of you was to decide we want to amputate his legs because he's got that, and you took a vote on it, there's nothing I can do. And what they will say is that's all fine and dandy because it's the common good, right? Because everyone's decided that's what it is. What the Constitution tells you is if an individual stands up and says no, it is no, right? As long as it's your constitutional right and common law right, the courts should back you up. And invariably they do, as long as you know your rights. Two people that have come to me and have been arrested for an offensive weapon in a public place, I have put forward on their behalf the English Bill of Rights and the right to self-defence and to be unarmed in your defence. And on one occasion, the judge asked him, what's your defence? Because I said, sack your solicitor and sack your barrister, and put this statement short. It was, by the way, it was a jury trial. And they hadn't called in the jury yet. And the judge said, what is your defence? And he read the statement that I'd written and said, all right, tell me what happened. And he told the judge, and the judge said, I find you not guilty. That was it. Didn't even call the jury in, right? That's the power of your constitution. If you understand, don't go into court demanding that the judge read out his oath, right? That's not what you should be doing, right? A judge is only a judge because he took the oath. You're not allowed to sit there. And by the way, judges can perjure their oaths. Did you know that King Alfred, listen to this, hanged 44 judges for perjuring their oaths? And the reason why it was 44 judges, and there was a lot more, it was about 300 judges that were crooked. He just took all their possessions, took their house and made them destitute. But the 44 judges that had created judgments that an Englishman died, in other words, were hung, or hanged, I should say, or various different things, them judges was an eye for an eye. He said, you perjured your oath and an Englishman's died, you hang. And he hanged 44 judges, right? People don't, especially in the legal profession, they don't like me reminding them of that fact, right? But in America, by the way, they do know that. And they are a common law jurisdiction, and they refer back to English common law. So once you understand how this all works, so the Crown and Parliament Recognition Act had to be put in place before this was put in place and before the Bill of Rights was put in place. So the Crown and Parliament Recognition Act is really important as a document to the Glorious Revolution, because that's how it recreated a parliament and the Crown in Parliament. It's really important that people understand that that Bill of Rights is about power sharing, and it's about government by consent. So you consent to be governed, but the reason you are governed that way, and again, Ashby versus White, 1703, Lord Chief Justice Holt, the guy who wrote that, he was the one who was involved with that particular case. If you do not give your consent, so if you wrote on a ballot, and by the way, you must vote. Anyone who doesn't vote, you're handing the country over to communists. Anyone tells you not to vote, you're handing the country to communists. They demoralise you, and that's what they've been doing, to stop you from voting, because you're all saying, there's no one to vote for. Right? And what I tell people, bearing in mind we're non-political, if you've got no one to vote for, write on your ballot, I do not consent, Ashby versus White, 1703. You put that in the ballot box. When they start to, so first of all they do a massive count up and get the return, and then they pull all them ballots to one side. They're telling you, this is important, that it's a spoiled ballot. There's no such thing as a spoiled ballot. Don't, I'll probably watch my language here because we want this video to go out everywhere. Don't be writing silly pictures of a male sex organ, right? Or anything like that, or write swear words on it. That's just being stupid, right? Write on it, in law, I do not consent, Ashby versus White, 1703. When that pile is higher than any individual candidate, so let's say the winner gets 20 votes, but there's 30 votes, Ashby versus White, I do not consent, you have now created a constitutional crisis because you do not consent, right? They have to reconvene an election petition hearing, right? But they actually bring the king in. They have to, because he's the crown in Parliament. And he says, what's the problem? Right? And the judges say, the problem is your subjects do not consent to their governments. Right? It's a massive thing. People do not realise how powerful it is in the common law. And what you're being suckered by these people that tell you not to vote. Right? I want you just to make sure you're all aware of this. Right? Communists work by demoralisation. Marxists work by demoralisation. They demoralise you into not voting. When you all stop voting, what happens to them people who are incentivised to take over your country and your laws and to install an administrative state? That 10% of the population are voting. When you stop voting, their vote appears bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? When in fact, they're only that much. They've just managed to psychologically demoralise you and you stop voting. The most important thing you can do is vote. So, again, once you understand that all them things are really important and serious, there is something I want to make sure I read out to you before I go on to the next part. 2 seconds. 1310. Right, so this particular book, Housby's Laws of England. Huh? Sorry. Housby's Laws of England, 4th edition. Now, this is the common law, right? Volume 8, Constitutional Law. What I'm going to try and do, at page 809, and again, I don't like reading law to people, but this is important. At page 809, it talks about the civil servants, right? It is a breach of discipline for civil servants not to obey those rules. In addition, civil servants may be subjected to a purge procedure and a positive vetting procedure. The purge procedure is designed to prevent persons with communist or fascist associations being employed on work, the nature of which is vital to the security of the state. Do you all understand that? So why are there 141 Fabians elected as MPs who are committed Marxists? Yeah. Why is the whole of the cabinet currently Fabians? And the last time we had that, I said it at the beginning and I'll say it again, was Tony Blair, and we went to war with Iraq on a lie. Right? That's how dangerous it is when you don't know that is in that law book. That is the common law of England, right? So one of the problems that we have is with cancellation, right? Because these same people have brainwashed people that we're the bad guys when we're the good guys, right? There is more that I'm going to say when we get through this slightly, because what I want you to all understand is that English or British?
English.
English? The British only, technically the British only really existed as a nationality from 1948. The statutory union only existed, and by the way it was wrong, the Scots sent a 5,000-man army into England marching towards that British Parliament, right? I take my hat off to them people. There were riots for 2 years in Scotland. The British sent the military into Scotland to literally annihilate all of the people that was against it. And by the way, they did the same to the English in 1819. It was called Peterloo. When we stood up and said we wanted to vote, they slaughtered 19 of us. By the way, the British bayoneted a baby in arms, right? So if you all think the British are nice people, I'm talking about the ruling class, the British establishment, right? These people that control us, that you have no control of. Normal, everyday people like us, right? We are not of that character, and they've conned you. So making sure you understand that 7 years after the Acts of Union in 1707, 1706, 1707, there's two parts of the Acts of Union, was enacted, yeah? How many people knew that 7 years later it was brought before Parliament to annul it? But they never tell you that. Because people were so disgruntled with this. There's a book on here from A.V. Dicey, that one. And A.V. Dicey, well, not that one. It's here somewhere, one of them ones, probably that one. A.V. Dicey, right? Another great scholar. I didn't used to like him. Then I started reading his works. I thought, this guy really knows what he's talking about. And he started off as a unionist, right? And then when he understood the law and what they was doing, he completely changed his mind. The important part of A.V. Dicey is that the left and the corrupt part of our politicians always quote him by saying Parliament is sovereign. In his second book, that they never tell you about, he clarified what he meant. The people are sovereign, right? And they transfer their sovereignty when you elect your Member of Parliament. You lend your sovereignty to the Commons. The Commons is your domain, not the Crown domain. The Crown domain is the House of Lords. They are the peers of the King. Your peers reside as a jury in the House of Commons, right? And Parliament is both buildings together. And then you've got the third element, which is the judiciary. So once you understand, again, these seminars, they're never the same. Different subjects will come up, and the question and answers is 9 out of 10 times the best part. If you want to start talking about militias, we have to turn the cameras off. But the militias are perfectly legal. Are we in Essex here or in Hertfordshire? Essex. Okay. Essex is such a great place. Did you know that the people of Essex and the Essex Rifles repelled a Napoleonic invasion? They went back to their cottages because every Englishman was armed, right? Went back to the beach where Napoleon was landing like an exhibition force and started shooting at them. And then they rowed back to their ships and got away from the shores because we repelled them, basically. And that was the people of Essex that did that. Does everyone know what the peasant revolt is? Peasants' revolt did not start in Kent. It started in Essex, right? So you're very rebellious against typically against anyone in authority, which is a good thing, right? It is never a good thing to accept authority. Always question it. So the peasant revolt started because they started putting a new tax, very similar to a poll tax. But in a particular village, the king's men come out, and one of the ways they could, that this tax was on marriage, so there was a particular group of people, those king's soldiers and tax collectors, and they started to physically examine some of the women of the village. Right? So they were sticking their fingers where they wanted to check for virginity. And if you were seen not to be a virgin, you was married, and therefore you was taxable, right? Well, it turns out that the baker wasn't very happy with this soldier sticking his fingers near his daughter, and basically went back, got his sword, come back and went whack and cut his head off. And it all kicked off in the village, right? So they'd done the first lot of soldiers. Go on, Essex! Right? They went back, and the soldiers, one or two of the soldiers escaped. By the way, my history lessons are like no one else. and then they've gone back and they said, we've got a rebellion, right? But they haven't said what they was doing. No one gave them permission to do that. They was just taking advantage of their power, right? They've gone back and they sent another group of soldiers. But as they did, the original village sent out a message to the other villagers, and the other villagers said, we ain't happy with that. So they all drew their weapons and come back. There was another big scrap. By this time it had gone, the message had got out to Norfolk, Hertfordshire, Kent, and then they started making their way to the River Thames. The River Thames wasn't what it was like now. And they come across the River Thames to exactly where I used to live, in Erith, right? And they crossed the Thames, and this army of people started to form, all armed. They then started to cross down, they went to Canterbury. And one of them had been arrested, and they locked him in Rochester Castle, right? Did you know that? So what did the people do? They surrounded the castle and said, let him out, or we're storming the castle and we're going to do everyone in there bar our mate. You either let him out or we're doing you. Next thing you know, the drawbridge went and out he walks, right? And then, this is simplifying it by the way, they then marched on London, and the meeting point was Blackheath, or Blackheath Common. And then within days they had marched on London, and that's where Wat Tyler come into it and various other people. But Wat Tyler was just one of the people they executed. Part of the problem of the peasants' revolt, and this is always the problem, is one group of people got what they wanted, right? So they started to move away from the protest, leaving other people that were standing out and saying, no, we can't leave until we get everything. The people that they left to carry on got slaughtered, right? Because the rest of them wouldn't back them up. The problem with patriots, right, and I mean real patriots, is you're like herding cats, right? Sheep are easy, communists are easy, fascists are easy, right? Why is it? Because it's centralised, they all do what they're doing, and they say, listen, this is what we've got to achieve, let's get there, then we'll argue later, right? And they all move forward with one. Except patriots like us and free thinkers, people who have got critical thought, they're saying, oh, I don't agree with that. And you'll argue now, not later, right? That's why we look disorganised, but we're not in reality. We're just proper thinking people, unlike them. I've got one other quick question before I go through this, but I have to watch the time because I can talk for hours about all this. I'll ask you a question. You understand that communism is on the left? Would that be fair to say? You understand? Where do you think Nazis stand? Left or right? Where?
Right.
All right. Show of hands if you think Nazis are right wing. Right. Show of hands if you think Nazis are left wing. Right, the left have it. Nazis are National Socialists. Right? And no, I'm not goose-stepping. I'm just trying to get me sciatica working. Right? Nazis are exactly, and I've just told you from the law books, if you are an Englishman, and a true Englishman, you do not allow fascism and you do not allow communism. Why? Because they are both authoritarian government and the English have never accepted that. Right? That's what you all push forward and say, we do not accept the government doing X, Y, Z, Foxtrot Oscar. Right? And that's the way we've always been. So Nazis are on the left. But who was it that conned you into believing that Nazis were on the right? Mainstream media, political parties, they're all the same group of people, right? And they've lied to you. Universities, slow march through the institutions. Does everyone understand that a question was put to President Xi of China? And they said to him, what do you think of the success of the French Revolution? And do you know what he said? It's too early to tell. Right?
Clever man.
Communism and fascism is multi-generational, bit by bit by bit. So you don't realise they're taking your rights off you. There's certain things I could explain to you and you would go, wow, I never knew that was linked to that. Statutory instruments, which is about 20 below the power of that, is one of the ways they've been using. Everyone heard of an attachment of earnings? Right, where that was done by statutory instrument, where they can actually take your wages without even going to court, right? And it was done by statute. That is completely unlawful, right? But they managed to do it. And the rule is, if they put a statutory instrument in place and no one is complained in 3 months, it doesn't need to have a vote in the House. So what they do is they get a statutory instrument in place and don't use it, and don't publicise it for 3 months, 6 months or whatever, but it's in place. So it's had no effect on you, but all of a sudden you go past the legal element that they say you can't do this. There's lots of things that they're doing now that is completely unlawful. But again, if you look at some of these books, this one here, I've got all the volumes of this, and very old book. Law and Custom of the Constitution, Anson, Volume 1. He's one of our greatest scholars. They talk in the old books about something, the cabal. Right? Everyone heard of that song? There's cabal. Right? Did you know that the cabal existed for hundreds of years? The ruling classes have existed for hundreds of years. Some people call it an oligarch. Some people call it corporations. Some people call it all sorts of things. But what it is, and our ancestors called it a cabal. We have always had issues with these people. Where did we used to convene to discuss these issues? Alehouses, pubs. What was the first thing they did during COVID? Shut the pubs. Right? What was the place that bailed us out of trouble when we was cancelled, right, on our other council property? This place, what is it technically? An alehouse, right? Yeah. So the alehouses was always crucial to England, right? Because the people used to talk to each other. And they had freedom of expression. If you want me to go through some of them, and I can read them out to you, it tells you what all your rights are, your common law rights. It's actually listed. So freedom of expression, freedom of association. Anyone involved with protests at the moment, you have the perfect right to protest. They've tried to curtail it slightly, that if you're going on a march, you have to tell them and give them permission. You never have to give the police any notification, don't matter how big it's going to be, for an assembly. An assembly is a statutory protest. In law, it is still constitutionally protected, right? So as long as you're going to one place and you don't move. I was at Rotherham some years ago, and the police was trying to get us to push around to this other area, and I said, I'm not leaving. It's exactly where I've said I'll meet people. I'm not moving. One other guy, unfortunately named Peter Lynch, who's now dead, he kept trying to get me to march on the street. I said, if you do that, you're giving them the opportunity to nick you. Don't give them the opportunity to nick you. Stay here, right? And he wanted it, and he did, and he got nicked, right? So what I'm saying to you is, the other thing is, for protests, and some of this will come up later, are you all aware, as Englishmen, it is your duty to make sure that no one commits a crime in front of you? Yep. You're all aware of that? What? Are you all aware that you have, under English law, the right to citizens' arrest, right? You have the same powers as a police constable. The only thing that you cannot do, they have something called a general warrant, right? And that's what they take their oath for, to get the general warrant. So they can arrest someone when they haven't seen the crime being committed, but they need information, right? It used to be called in the old days an information. It's a statement from someone. So if you go and make a statement against someone, sign it and say, I witnessed that person commit a crime, the police officer can then go and arrest them, right? But you, if you see a crime being committed, doesn't matter what the crime is, you can arrest that person on the spot, you can detain them, and guess what, people? That includes you can arrest police constables, right? So one thing I want to make sure is and this is for protest environments, and I've seen it happen a number of times, that police officers draw batons, right? Right. That is a threat of violence. It is called assault, right? Aggression, what I mean by that is if you walk up to someone and you're shaping up, right, they can knock you spark out. All this, they must throw a punch first, is nonsense. If you believe someone is about to hit you, you can knock them spark out. Do not do anything else if you do knock them out. That's the bit that's illegal, right? If someone's unconscious, you don't kick them in the head, because they can't defend themselves. So you're hitting someone who is defenceless. That is highly illegal, right? The point I'm making is when them police officers pull out their batons, they are then committing a criminal offence, and the criminal offence is assault, which is the threat of violence. If they hit you with a baton, that's battery. And then there's various elements that go up in the law, all the way up to section Offences Against the People's Act 1861. So if you was to use a baton against someone and you cut them as well, or you hurt them, or you break their legs, which someone did, 4 coppers did to a guy for no reason in Hertfordshire, and snapped his shins with their batons for nothing, right? Never been had no criminal convictions. He didn't even have a warrant out for him, right? And that's what they did to him. By the way, it was all on camera. Someone else had videoed it. The important part of what I'm saying is that offence is a section 18, which means with intent. Right? So if you hit someone with a baton and you snap their leg, that's obviously with intent to injure them seriously, right? That carries a life sentence. Not only does it carry a life sentence, there is aggravating factors. So, for example, if it's obvious they're attacking you because you're waving an English flag, which is often what they're doing to us now, attacking the English, and I'm going to get to another quick point before I go further, you've got to understand that you have the right to arrest them. And I've tried to tell people that. When you go to a protest, when they start being aggressive towards you, if you are calm, collected, and the other thing is I don't think we've brought it with us, but in the High Court, if you've got a high vis on with legal observer on the front and legal observer on the back, The High Court accepts you as a professional witness. Does everyone know that? No. You are not allowed to speak, interfere, but what you are allowed to do, and this is for the auditors, so there's a number of people that go out and audit the police, etc. It's very similar to auditing. You're not allowed to talk to them. You're not allowed to be on the side of the protester or on the side of the police. But if you are an independent witness, and that's what you're regarded as by the High Court, this has already been proven in law, by the way, you videoed it and taken notes, so then you say to the judge, here is my video evidence, here is my notes, this is what happened, and then the judge goes, okay, let's have a look at this, right? And that's where you can benefit yourselves. It takes, and you can ask the auditors this, a lot of mental discipline not to get involved. But you must realise, for you to be a professional witness and regarded as that by the High Court, you must have a higher level of professionalism not to get involved. Just to stand back. If you go and watch police officers arrest people, there's a bit of a disturbance. You often see two of them will stand back, right? And all they're doing is observing. And then it's their details, they write down, he did this, he did that, he did that. And then them two officers will come forward and give evidence, because the other coppers are involved with actually trying to sort it out. The other ones stand back. They're observing, right? And that's what they're trained to do. So part of my job is to train you to do that. And people, you forget now how easy it is for us to have access to cameras, or Andy the Gabby Cabby going somewhere, or Emma going somewhere, or all these people, especially auditors, right? The auditors have already been technically pre-trained. Some of them, is it AY audits? He's very good. I was really impressed with some of the stuff he did, right? The point being, he's actually videoing, and then if he gets into it, I mean, he even said to one police officer, the police officer said, if you don't leave, I'm going to arrest you. And he turned around and he said, if you touch me, I'm going to arrest you. I am going to citizens arrest you. Do you understand that? And you could see the copper's face change. He went, right? And he didn't touch him. He didn't arrest him. But what AY Audits was telling the copper is, I know my rights. My right is, I've done nothing wrong. You lay a finger on me, it's an unlawful arrest. You lay a finger on me, it is battery if you touch me, and your aggressiveness is assault. Do you understand that? And the police are like, okay. Do you know what I mean? They haven't been trained well enough, by the way, police. I mean, they used to be. Let me have a drink of this water, and then, I'm not sure, how far are we into this so far?
Far enough.
Does anyone want to use the loo now? And then I'll go through that part, and then we'll do a questions and answers.
We're at an hour and a half so far. Hour and a half.
Right, we've got another 30 minutes so far, but there's a few people shooting out to the toilet. Toilets are that way! Hang on 2 seconds, let me grab a drink of water. I'm getting more and more
Good
hot.
old days of usherettes coming round with cigarettes and ice cream.
Well, I suggest we have a comfort break now, because it looks like people do want to do that. So we'll reconvene in 15 minutes, but we need to be prompt. And then I'll go through some final points and then go through your rights.
Joe, would you like another cappuccino?
Can I ask you something a bit in advance?
Don't forget I'm deaf, so you have, and I ain't got no hearing aids in. That's my best ear, that's my really bad ear. Go on.
I didn't know that.
No.
Okay. Constitutional conventions. Can you weave them in the talk and tell us your views? You know how they go? I couldn't find any reference of constitutional amendments literally before, I don't know, last century. But it's good.
Go on.
It's good if you do mention them, because I think the only
You mean a constitutional convention?
such as the monarch appoints the whoever has command of Parliament, that is a convention. But it also means